Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this webinar hosted by Chambers Wales. It's called Recover, Rebuild and Revitalise, and I'm joined by 4 prominent members of the Welsh business community. And we're sitting in a socially distant round. We're all in the same place together, and we're going to try and have a conversation together that we hope you'll find to be very helpful around the themes of recover, rebuild and revitalise. We've all been through a hell of a year, and our focus has been on survival. The focus has been on what does this mean for me? How do I get through all of this? We're coming to the point where we now need to look forward. People see opportunities arising out of this situation, and we thought what we'd try and do is have what I would call a positive conversation about what are the things one might do to do the best from where we are at the moment, particularly within a Welsh context. So I'm going to, in a moment, pass over to my colleagues to answer an initial opening question. And then I'm going to go with the flow. We've had loads of questions come in online, thank you very much, which I'm going to try and weave into the conversation as it goes on. You've got an opportunity in the chat room to pose more. We'll do what we can to squeeze those in, but that might be a bit difficult. We'll do what we can. So just by way of opening, so I'm one of the co-founders and senior partner of Capital Law, commercial law firm based in Wales, working nationally, internationally. And we touch a very diverse part of the economy, nature of our business. So last year we worked for 1,000 separate organisations. And what we've seen are people trying to do business. We've seen people with their chin up, working very, very hard. And if that's not working, we'll work on something else. That's what we're seeing. Of course, with Brexit as well, there are people having real challenges. But if I can go around the room to my colleagues and introduce yourselves when I get to you, what are your clients seeing? So Paul first.
Thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everybody. Paul Slevin from Quantuma. We are a national and international advisory business, advising SMEs and mid-range codes. I think the last year has been it's been a true revelation, really. I think many businesses have used that expression, if I may. I'll just use it once, okay? Many businesses have pivoted. That's it. We're not allowed to use it again. The economy feels like it's divided into 3 sectors. There are those businesses who are really getting going and doing stuff. There are those businesses that are struggling because maybe their supply chain is not as resilient as they had hoped. And there are those businesses that are still impacted by COVID restrictions. For us nationally, I think there are 4 things that are really starting to impact on businesses. And we've spent a lot of time analysing what survival is about. And I think now we really need to look forward to say what is recovery and getting back to a sustainable position. I'm going to avoid using the word normal because that's a debate in itself. But back to a sustainable position where those businesses are more resilient and we are mitigating the impact or the potential impact of unemployment. And I think the 4 issues for us are, it's about property. So if you're a leaseholder, what's your relationship with your landlord? What will be the impact of any legislation changes in respect of what the landlord can do if you have unpaid rent, etc. So that could be a fairly sizable issue. If you haven't paid your rent for the last 12 months, you could have a significant problem looming there. I think the second issue for us is around people. Do you have the people with the right skill set? And secondly, if you do need new people, is there a pool of those people out there? Because we're certainly seeing some indications in certain sectors where there's a bit of a battleground for future recruitment and people are starting to pay really quite high salaries. And that's not helpful in an SME environment where maybe you can't compete with some of the bigger companies. I think the third area for us is about marketplace. And I think people need to look very carefully at their supply chain, both up and down the supply chain, because either Brexit or the pandemic may have negatively affected that supply chain. Maybe that market's gone away, maybe that customer's gone away, maybe that supplier has failed. So you can't go back to work on the assumption that actually your supply chain is robust and resilient. And I think the 4th area, which I know we will cover because our colleagues are here from the finance sector, is that government support schemes in their widest sense, have been a tremendous asset and support for many businesses. And as a result of that, we have seen many businesses survive. You know, we know that insolvencies are down by an excess of a third over last year. So there are lots of businesses out there in survival mode. It has also had a very positive effect on unemployment. It has mitigated unemployment by keeping those people in work on the furlough scheme. Now, when they are pulled away, do the companies who now wish to get going have sufficient cash to be able to fill their order books? Have they got the orders? Have they got the cash to yield the materials? And have they got the space to be able to wait 30, 60, 90 days until they are paid? So for us, those are the four sort of macro issues that we see businesses in service and in manufacturing affecting them.
Okay, people, property, marketplace, finance. Simon, what are you seeing with your clients?
Simon T, managing partner at Kilsby & Williams. You used the number 1,000 clients. I'd say we have 1,000 clients as well, so it's a popular number. It's a broad section of businesses we look after, so I'd like to think that we've got our finger on the pulse in terms of what's going on generally. I'd say look, there's a number of sectors that have been hit, and we all know which ones they are: hospitality, property related, lots of others we can mention. But by and by, if a business was good pre-COVID, it's virtually back to where it was. Not quite in some cases, some of them are better than before. But I think there's a lot of doom and gloom talked about those businesses, but I'd say totally the opposite. Everybody I'm talking to is very, very positive. They all want to get going. They're frustrated by particularly this last sort of couple of months where everybody is champing at the bit. They want to get on with it. There's a lot of good support schemes out there. And I think particularly in Wales, I think, we were talking about this earlier about initially when COVID kicked off, I was just very, very disappointed with the rate of change that we had from the Welsh Government. It was very, very slow, but when they got going, I would say it was absolutely fantastic. The support schemes, the money from the Development Bank of Wales, and in fact the last one that came out was so popular it got shut down within less than 24 hours, and that became very, very frustrating. And I think that was probably, it was a factor of their success that it became so popular. All the various lending schemes, C-bills, bounce back loans, you name it, everybody's stocked up with those. Some have used them to protect their businesses, some have used them just to store cash on their balance sheets. But we're starting to see numbers come through now. So you can imagine in accountancy practice, there was a period where we were all sat on our hands with nothing to do pretty much, other than talk to our clients. We're now doing numbers for them, so we're talking to them. And I'd say actually the majority of them are in very, very good shape. And I think I'd also add this is, I think it's a testament to the ability of Welsh entrepreneurs in the area. The stewardship they've shown through this period has been absolutely fantastic. And to be fair, even those ones that are outside of those sectors, which I'm saying are okay and they're insulated, have done the right things in the majority of cases. So I think, we'll talk about finance soon, but generally speaking, I'm feeling very, very positive about the future. There's a number of challenges coming up, which I'm sure we'll talk about, but no, it's really good.
So our leaders are better because of what they've been through.
Yeah, fantastic.
And I see it in both the chat room, or people say to us that they feel supported by the government and by both governments and by the schemes that have been coming out. Jon, before we went on camera, you told a really interesting story about how when the pandemic hit, you'd never seen anything like it in the bank before. I think that would be quite interesting to put out there. But then what are you also seeing now?
Yeah, sure. So good afternoon, everyone. I won't use your pivoted word, Paul. It's been used once, so I'll keep that. So Jon Lambird, for the purpose of everybody else, I head up Barclays business in Wales. We talked about 2008 and the financial crash, and that was a difficult period. But honestly, really, it was a cakewalk in comparison to what we saw when this COVID pandemic first started. And I think it was probably a mixture of the messages that came from the government were almost in a sense saying you have to grasp this right now. So even if the business at that point was in good shape, I'm not sure they were confident that the scheme would be there for a period of time. So it was almost it's available, let's try and access it. And I think the challenge we had was the banks weren't prepared at that point for just the pure volume, the sheer volume of clients that would come through and ask us for those funds. And you're having to set up brand new processes to facilitate some of these funds. So if you think about the C-bills, that was in some way like an old EFG that fundamentally you still applied your bank policy to that scheme to write that. But if you think of the Beebles, that was almost like an online application, almost self-certified for clients. And so you had to be almost like a transactor for that scheme, and they were coming through in their thousands, and I mean daily in their thousands. So I'll give you a quick stat to try and bring it to life. In the past 12 months, Barclays has facilitated about 27 billion to about 335,000 customers. That's probably about 4 years worth of output, if you like, in probably about 6 months.
So eight times activity.
Yeah,
Wow.
it's incredible.
And how is it now?
Yeah, I take your point. I think the schemes have done a fantastic job, and I'm sure there'll be somebody watching that will say, actually, my circumstance is different to that, and I think it's difficult to capture all. But broadly, I think that they've done a good job. I think where we're at now is those schemes are coming to the end, and we'll talk about this in a second. I think it's about what the next scheme will do, which was launched in April, and how that enables businesses, to Paul's point, to actually start to grow and go forward. So in some aspects, the Seables and the Beebles schemes were almost about mitigants and just making sure the businesses didn't fail. And actually, they've probably done a bit better than that. They've probably actually grown businesses in some aspect, or helped businesses grow. But the new scheme is about how we take the business and how we take the economy forward. So we're kind of through that phase, hopefully, of disruption and pause, and then we're into the kind of growth part.
Okay, I'm going to come back to you.
Sorry, are you seeing a surge in applications now towards the end of March?
When the Chancellor announced the start of the new scheme in April, and then reminded clients that the old scheme ended in March, we saw a spike in the Beebles in particular.
Yeah, okay.
Not necessarily the Seables, but the Beebles in particular, we did see that spike. So we're almost, okay, just before that ends, let me access
I'm finding
that.
a lot of clients asking about that now, just with the number of days to go, seeing, should we just top up and make sure we got the money?
Yeah, and I think the beauty today versus 12 months ago is we're absolutely prepared for that. So okay. it didn't really resonate from us in terms of that uplift. We can deal with that. When it first happened, it was different.
Hear from Jon, and I'm going to come straight back to you if I can, because I want to pick up on that theme about finance. So finally, Jon, two Jons.
Jon Maycock, Commercial Director for Propel, a small business lender specialising in asset finance and technology finance.
And how's your market been? How are your customers dealing with this?
I echo some of what Jon says in terms of if I roll back a year ago, some of the stories we had were harrowing. And at the outset of that, before the amount of government stimulus and support packages were rolled out, it was a very bleak outlook for a number of the customers where cash simply dried up. We've seen in the asset finance industry roughly 20 to 40% or across different competitors of customers seeking payment holidays, and that spiked very early. But subsequently, since then, we've seen those numbers come off quite significantly through the industry. So support from government, from Beebles, from the bank lending particularly, has been hugely helpful. I think we've seen a few waves in line with COVID and lockdown, but what we're starting to see now is a huge increase in inquiry for businesses seeking to invest in capital equipment. That's what we do. That's where we see the interest come through, and I think that's off the back of increased confidence with what we expect to happen with pandemic and release. Sector by sector is very different. So you've got to be, you've got to have your niche view on sectors and how to support them and when they'll be looking to invest. We've seen also through what we'll see come through in terms of the super deduction, what we'll see in terms of the recovery loan. We see that's been hugely supportive. But I think one of the challenges for every business to face into is how does my cash flow look going forwards when I've got to start repaying. And whether that's on my rent, whether that's on my government debt or the Seables that I've taken on, and how do I ensure that any future investment that I'm making today, I can support that to ensure that that I'm going to get that payback in time with the increased cash flow burden. That
segues nicely into the question I'd like to ask Jon, which is many people watching will have taken Seabills, Beebles, call it COVID debt, and will have COVID damaged balance sheets, but need finance to recover, rebuild and revitalise. How are you going to deal with that?
So I think there's two things. I think the announcement the Chancellor made about the new scheme, the business recovery loan in April, is a really good thing. So I think had he not had any scheme to follow on from the Seables and Beebles scheme, I probably would have been a bit concerned, because to your point, they're going to start to kick in. And for some customers that have just almost mothballed their business, when you start that business up, you need cash flow. You can't just kind of start it and say, come in and buy something if you've got no money. So cash flow is really important. I think the new scheme is available from April, and I believe the majority of banks will support that, if not all banks. We are supportive of that in Barclays. The new scheme is not just about disruption, so it does talk about cash flow, it does talk about investment, it does talk about growth. So on top of if you've had CBILS or BBILS, that is a scheme that you can access. So I think in terms of a continuation of schemes, that's there, and that's a really good thing. And it's a pretty accessible scheme. Rates are fair. The only thing I would flag to anybody listening is it's unlikely to have that period that we had with CBILS and BBILS, which is this 12-month period where you don't have to make payments. I think payments will start from the off. I think then in terms of standard, if you want to go back and call it traditional lending that happened before COVID, you know, look, I think we'd been naive if we said it wasn't difficult out there. Yeah. It's a tough environment still for the majority of businesses, and I guess what my advice would be there, and is always my advice, is the relationship that you have with your accountant, your lawyer, and your bank is really important. And if you're looking to do something sizable, and not necessarily even sizable, but if you're just looking to do something, visibility is all right. So just be transparent. Now, Simon made a point the other day when we were chatting actually around not all banks offer you a relationship point, and it could be a digital bank, it could be a telephony-based bank. So I understand you can't maybe have that dialogue that you might have if you've got a relationship point. But you can ask your bank, what is it that I need in order to access finance from you? So if I want to buy this unit for $500,000 to store my goods in, what do I need to display to you? What do I need to show you? What are the numbers? Then you can have the conversation with your accountant and say, this is what I've been told. And then you have that dialogue and you say, okay, what can I present now to the bank to see if I can access that? So, you know, I think that relationship is important. And then I think if I just think about this week, and last week actually, in Wales, which is really positive, where we've completed on deals that maybe people watching would think a bank's appetite still in those sectors. So we've completed on a caravan park in H&L, sizable deal, in excess of £1 million on that one. That's maybe a sector people would think banks wouldn't be open for. We completed on education sector, which is quite interesting. That's actually online learning, which is quite COVID proof. That's the right terminology. So if COVID resurrects itself, you can still kind of teach people online. Care, which again, I think has been a difficult sector. We've seen what happened with COVID and the impact it's had on care homes and residents, unfortunately. And manufacturing, which again, that is I think manufacturing has been a pretty stable sector. I think the challenge for manufacturing is necessarily not COVID, but more supply chain because of COVID, more supply chain because of Brexit, and that's maybe creating issues. So if you like traditional lending, we're still doing that, and we're still supportive of that. But that relationship with your bank, your accountant, and your lawyer is key to making sure that when you come to us and you present to us, you've got all that information that you need and we'll ask you for.
So what you're saying is, if you haven't got a direct relationship, use your accountant or your lawyer who will have that relationship. Yeah, you'll say, so the banks are open for business, but the reality of life is, if you're COVID affected, you're COVID affected, and you just have to manage that, and you're going to need some help to managing that to build a better case to get the funding that you need. Yes,
for me, the stakeholders have not changed. So stakeholders and access to finance are the same as they were 5 years ago. They're exactly the same today. Okay. So good accountants, good lawyer, good bank, alternative funders as well. So we're blessed in Wales with Development Bank of Wales. That's quite unique. They're fantastic for businesses.
And they've been doing a lot during the...
They've been absolutely phenomenal. The fund you mentioned earlier went in 22, 23 hours, which was on and off the system. It was 100 million. It was that successful. But alternative funders now are out there. We partner with Propel. You know, they are... it's not just about one place now. There are lots of places.
I was going to go to Jon about that now. So we just talked about bank lending. Other than bank lending, what would you suggest to those watching?
I think it's kind of, for me, three basic tenets that I'd look at in terms of how do I fund my business. A, debt, B, equity, and C, how do I look at any grant funding that's available. I know we'll touch on a few of those items. But on the debt side, it may be that there are alternative specialist products out there, be that asset finance, be that invoice finance, that it may make sense to partner with somebody other than your bank to provide that and preserve some of the headroom in your bank facility. There will be those that are, and you know, in our business, we're trying to match up the right finance with the capital investment in the equipment and really understand that equipment and help you and your business such that you can make an investment that will pay off over time, pay off over the long term, but also spread the cost of that purchase to make that affordable in the immediacy. And I think that there's a job for us all to do in terms of creating that awareness, whether that's the banks, the independents, the accountants, the lawyers, etc., so that we can help educate SMEs, but also for SMEs to go and have that thirst to network and go and find out about these things. I also think there's a real key requirement for firms to think about, how do I invest in technology? So technology has just seen a massive increase over the past 12 months because we've been forced to adopt it and adapt to it. So I see that as being really key. And lastly,
there's specialist lenders in that sector, are there?
Absolutely. That's something that we do. So as well as the what we refer to as the hard assets, the trucks and trailers, and leasing those over 5 years, we've partnered with a number of technology firms. There's one in Cwmbran, Nuvius, who are actually a Zoom distributor. And so we're financing the equipment that will probably be in this room now to enable businesses to operate both in an office and remotely simultaneously.
And these funders that you're talking about, these lines of funding, is this replicating what was there pre the pandemic that people might not previously have thought about? Or are funders looking at this as an opportunity and offering new lines of funding? Are they seeing it as an opportunity?
I think it's, those funders have been there before the pandemic. So it's not something that's necessarily new. I think that the key around it is helping to drive awareness, helping to give businesses confidence, because notwithstanding the challenges that we've all faced, that businesses have faced and have still got to face, there will inevitably be, I think, a huge amount of opportunity for businesses. It will be different sector at different times. But if there is that opportunity, how do you get that confidence working, as you say, with getting as much advice as you can from others, and then finding the right way of funding the investment you need to make in that opportunity? So,
Paul, you summarised earlier on. Thanks, Johns. You summarised it earlier. One of your 4 was marketplace. Can we talk about onshoring? Because COVID and Brexit, in theory, shorten supply chains, create an opportunity for shortened supply chains. To some businesses at the moment, that might sound horribly theoretical, when they've just lost, they're struggling to supply customers on mainland Europe. Where's the opportunity in that?
I think there are a number of things that are influencing that. Onshoring, I think we've had a real salutary lesson in how to onshore in Wales during the last 12 months. So we went from a country that imported the majority of its PPE equipment to a country that became self-sufficient, to a country that became self-sufficient plus a gross exporter of PPE. And that was an awful lot of hard work that was done by a dedicated number of officials to drive that manufacturing program, with businesses who would normally be making something else, who turned their hand to face masks, to gowns, to gloves, to all of those things. And I can see it at home, because I could see these big aircraft coming in, picking up PPE and flying it out again, or in the early days, delivering PPE. And then by mid-pandemic, those aircraft weren't around anymore, because actually we had sufficient to be able to supply our own. So that's a big move. That's a big psychological shift from something which was probably predominantly Far East located into a Western European mature economy environment. And those businesses continue to be successful in that space because we have an ongoing demand for it. And I think what the influence of the pandemic and the influence of the end of the transition period, which kicked in obviously on the 1st of January, it's a great opportunity for people to look in detail now at their supply chain and say, where have I traditionally bought that? Well, I've bought that in Germany because it's X, Y, and Z. Or there's a perception that it's great quality because it's coming from here. Or actually that price is lower than I would be able to get it in this country. We've got to revisit that right now, because actually, does that price, low price, actually equal the total cost of landing that at your factory? Is it the total cost of the supply chain, or is it just the price? So if it's €5 in Germany and it's €7 in Wales, but now your documentation is costing you €1.50, is that really an economic prospect going forward.
And also there's a reliability of it, isn't there?
There is a reliability of it.
But can we rely on the market forces to do this for us quickly enough, or does it require government intervention? Because what the example you gave about PPE was very much led by the Welsh Government, who decided it was going to drive and shorten the supply chain, and boy, it did it really effectively. I mean, really effectively.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, if you look at their new economic recovery plan, it talks in there about procurement. It doesn't say exactly what they're going to do about procurement, but it talks about procurement. Does it take them to help make this happen? Do they have to force feed this?
I don't believe so. I think, you know, and you and I have had this conversation before, which says governments are there to create frameworks in which businesses to operate. It's actually up to the individuals and the businesses to make stuff happen. The government cannot prescribe this. The individuals have to create this, okay? And if I were sitting now in a manufacturing business, I would be looking at what it is I'm buying, piece by piece, material by material, and saying, are there alternative sources for that, which might be closer to home, which could be generating value in the economy here in Wales or in other parts of the UK? How can I ensure that I've got effectively a borderless transition of that material from one location to another?
And you're probably saying to the local suppliers, look up the supply chain and encourage that movement as well.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not advocating a Buy British campaign. All I'm saying is let's look at the values and the costs that we have in our supply chain, but also look at to make sure that those companies that you have traditionally bought from are actually still in existence, because some of them may not be.
I think businesses will generally do clever things. I think that's the thing to say. And I think what you said about private businesses, you know, looking at the costs, working out what to do and what's the right thing, that is a natural thing. But I also think sometimes that the government has to intervene. And it has to probably even adopt what people won't like to have it called as a carrot and stick sort of approach. And there's been many examples of that with the Welsh Government leading businesses into doing things, and then those businesses finding out that actually that's a really good thing to do. I'm sure we'll come on to, you know, people issues. You look at that very first Jobs Growth Wales scheme, that very first scheme they brought out, the incentive for people to take on people who are unemployed. They were paid, I don't know, 50% of the cost or whatever it was. And businesses said, oh yeah, we like that because it's cheap labour in their minds. But actually when they took them on, they found it was fantastic. And a lot of those people were, you know, they actually got jobs, they were continuing to be employed. And that whole scheme was then, you know, rolled out through the UK. And I think a lot of that sort of stuff they do, they've got to enhance and encourage businesses to try something, and then they'll find out that whether it works or not.
But I also think, Simon, there's a role for business in here too, because there are some really great companies here in Wales that have already committed sizable parts of their procurement programme to local businesses in Wales. You know, 50, 60, 70% of some materials going into some larger manufacturing businesses are procured here in Wales. And I think those businesses can lead by example, can lead by learning, can lead by experience. And maybe, you know, the obligation or the responsibility sits with them to stand up and say, hey, come and see what we've done, see if you can learn something from us.
The Welsh Government's report is saying, I think it was 38% of all NHS supplies were procured outside of Wales, and their target is to reduce that. So they will, I'm sure, come up with a lot of schemes to try and, you know, change that situation, and private businesses will thrive on that, because once those supplies are in Wales, they will dip into it because the cost will be less.
Mm.
We've got the climate challenge too. If you read that paper talks about the climate challenge, I think it's almost local is green.
Yeah.
As well, we shouldn't forget that. I'm not, to your point, I'm not saying we shouldn't go global, because global typically equals growth. So we do need a balance between the two. We can't be almost the border is you know, we do everything within that border, because that's probably not sensible. But we need to think of that border also what we can do within that border, and that will tick a lot of that green objective, because the more we can do within Wales, the better that is for that particular part. And we've got a responsibility to the planet, right? We can get we can get all David Attenborough here if you want to and start talking about it, but that's the reality, right, isn't it? And Wales has great resources and is a great place to live, and so we could do a lot more locally to help the climate, but at the same token, that we shouldn't treat, I get to the border and I stop. We should see what I can do outside of the border. What can Wales give to the rest of the world, because we can do stuff, as per your point.
I think to that point, John, I think, you know, the paper we're referring to is the Economic Resilience Plan published by ministers in the last couple of weeks. And that's very much about the green economy, but it's also about a quality of life.
Yeah.
And actually what onshoring does, you know, that short question you gave me a few minutes ago, what onshoring does is it actually addresses local economy, it addresses local employment, it addresses education, it addresses welfare. It starts to turn into a pan-economic solution to wider problems.
If we link this back to what does this mean for the people watching, what would they do as a consequence of this? I think it's that you've a government whose plan is based around wellness, people, green, digital, decarbonisation. That's coming down the pipe. Get ready for it. And the other challenge they've realised, as some of us who are involved in it will know, is every country in the world is saying that, and there's a prize for the one who gets there first. And from what we can see, they're determined to do that. So, aligned to it. Simon, can I get you to put your accountant's hat on, please?
He said no.
John very neatly earlier, it was very direct as well, but neatly said, the fact is businesses that have got COVID-dented balance sheets have got COVID-dented balance sheets. They have, okay? That doesn't mean they can't do business. They just got to go around doing it in a slightly different way. Can you pick that up? What are the sort of things, what are the sort of things you're helping your clients do with their balance sheets?
I'm just thinking about that phrase, COVID-dented balance sheet. And I understand what you mean, because don't forget, some balance sheets have actually improved because of COVID debt. So debt comes into the balance sheet, it's long-term debt, cash goes onto the balance sheet if it's not spent and ordered, therefore your liquidity on your balance sheet improves. So actually you've got a stronger balance sheet. So in not all cases, but in most cases, balance sheets are looking better. Look, I think we're all in that situation whereby we either want or we really do believe that demand is going to pick up. We've all seen the Bank of England keep on promising that they think there's going to be a V bounce, and I think that's right. I think there's a real surge in demand coming. You've got all the management consultants talking about revenge spend and the like, and it should hit all sectors. And I go back to my point, if you had a good business at the start, it should come back to being another good business now or fairly soon. So your issue is going to be around what you do going forward and how you can protect yourself. And your balance sheet is very, very important. Your balance sheet's going to be on display to the world, let's say for the next 12 months. You want that to look as good as possible. Why do you want that? Well, you want to protect your credit rating. So if you are going to expand and you're going to offer wonderful new contracts to become more profitable, you're going to need more working capital possibly. But you're also going to need a very, very strong balance sheet that gives you a good credit rating, which allows you to get good days from your suppliers. So 3 really good tips on that. One would be come year end, make sure you collect your debts in as hard as you can and actually delay paying your suppliers. Clearly, you don't just want to do it without having a conversation with any key suppliers, but if they're waiting 1 or 2 days extra, and you've had the conversation, it won't be a problem. And the effect of that is that you will show cash on your balance sheet. Your working capital won't necessarily alter, but you'll show cash on your balance sheet. And that does matter from a credit rating point of view. Second one is obviously when it comes to year end, obviously people think about bonuses and they think about dividends. Think of the timing of that. Don't do it on the year end or the month before. Push it into the next year. Make your balance sheet look stronger. Keep your shareholders' funds up. Another one people haven't thought about is, of course, is assets. So assets arguably might not have been used through COVID, because they might have been shut down, and therefore that depreciation charge needs looking at. If everybody applies the standard depreciation charge for the year, it comes off their profits, it comes off their balance sheet. But of course, if you then argue that the life of the assets is extended, you can change your depreciation charge, and therefore your balance sheet looks better. So all those things, you've got to be clever about what you're doing, because you get one chance. It's no good doing it 3 months later. You need to do it now.
Okay. Can I just come back to one thing there, because John's talked about the relationship with banks and the importance of any company having a direct relationship with the bank. And I absolutely agree with the fact that if you don't, as a business owner, your accountant, your lawyer, your mate, somebody does. So just, engage that way. And Simon's talked about the preparation of the balance sheet and the strength of the balance sheet coming out of year end. And there are times in our business when we're at a slightly different position in the company's life. And I just think one of the frustrations that we have, and I would encourage every business to do this, is we can't get up-to-date management information from businesses. So we get a call from a business says, I think I may not be able to meet the payroll on this date. Fine, send us your management information, let us have a look. It might take them some weeks to catch up. We are aware of certain businesses that have not done management information since last April. Okay, so I would at this time now, as we head for recovery, as we head for this revenge spend or whatever phrase you used, you know, when all of the information is so important, please spend a little time getting your management information up to date. Engage with your accountant to make sure that it is up to date. It is, all items are fairly treated, and you know exactly where you are as a business, and use it to forecast. Have a look at some, you know, am I going to do 100% of what I did pre-COVID? Is it 50%? Is it 110%? What is the effect of that on the business?
Okay.
All important stuff.
Yeah. So be on top of the detail. You need to be all over it at this time when it's uncertain.
Absolutely.
And so that's an absolutely critical point you made earlier, which is around as things open up, you're going to need cash for sales. You're going to need cash for growth. So either you're going to need to go to somebody to figure out how you get more cash, or you need to squeeze and pull the levers in your business and control those more effectively, which you can't do without that intel and that forecast.
There's also another point, isn't there, about credit insurance and something around that play as well, because obviously as businesses expand, they might be tempted to take on bigger things that they maybe shouldn't do, and it's that classic over-trading thing. I'm very confident from the people that I know and entrepreneurs and all the stuff that I've seen that they wouldn't do that, but I've seen it so many times where businesses will take on more business in their credit insurance, but they will make that judgment. They will say, well, okay, so if my credit limit's $500,000, I go to 700,000, I'm taking that risk. I look at the profit I make on that. Does that 200,000, you know, what's the risk reward on that? If 200,000 isn't going to actually wipe out my business, I might take that risk. So I think what I'm saying is that you don't want to go and take on a debt. If it goes bad, it takes out your business.
Okay.
Just do that balance. You're an entrepreneur, you know what you want to do, but don't go too far.
Conscious decision making.
Paul earlier on warned us not to use the word pivot, so I'm going to pivot the conversation.
Oops.
Completely. I'm going to pivot it completely onto people. All our organisations have our people, and many say have little else. People need great leaders. What does leadership look like now? What does great leadership look like to take advantage of dealing with what we've got at the moment and taking advantage of it? And let's start with Jon.
I think there's, as I see in my own business, as I see in some of our clients' businesses, human beings are hugely stressed, and they're stressed whether it's because of financial worries, they're stressed because of working remotely and on their own, or not being able to get around and socialise. So I think there's a huge requirement for empathy and understanding, whilst at the same time leaders are under huge pressure to solve the challenges in business. So it does require that broad-shouldered approach. Again, that comes how do I share some of that burden? How do I partner with other people? How do I interface with other people just to get some different ideas and try to get some external thinking into how I operate? I think the other aspect will be we've seen huge change already. I mean, from March the 22nd to March the 23rd, fundamentally different ways of working across every different sector across the market. Everybody's learnt to adapt to that very, very quickly. I think we'll see similar pace of change moving forwards, and therefore what is it that I need to be able to give my staff for them to do a great job? How do I tool them up? How do I give them the skills? And how do I think about creating the right talent to deliver for my customers and keep driving the business forward? I think those are the key issues as I think about the people challenge for a leader.
There's another one though, isn't there, which is, and we've all been through it, where on the 23rd of March you're told to stay at home. On the 24th of March, there started your 6 day a week, 12-hour a day. Okay, and that applied to many people who tried to continue in their business, regardless of what their sector was, whether they're in manufacturing and service industries. Those people are fatigued. They're exhausted, absolutely exhausted by the events of the last year. They've tried to keep their businesses afloat. They're now effectively being asked to recover those businesses, and to launch them back onto the marketplace again and make them even more resilient with potentially shorter supply chains and fit into the green economy and all the rest of the expectations. And yes, there are some funds around. We can see there are some funds. But the real challenge now will be dealing with the fatigue of management going forward in a very, very different world. And I think we need to recognise that, because I think that's a big issue for people.
One of the approaches we decided to take at Capital at the very beginning was to being very, very transparent with everybody about what the effect of this was, because everyone was worried. What does it mean for me? You know, are we going to go down the pan, or, you know, is this department going to close? This department, and we decided to be incredibly transparent. So we started publishing all our numbers on a monthly basis. And the second was then to listen and to talk to people, make sure that everyone has a voice and that you could spot, because there were some people who will flourish in a home working environment, and there are other people, and you can't always anticipate who they are, who really, really are going to struggle. And so that being transparent and listening was sort of the foundation. John, you were going to come in there, I felt.
Yeah, I completely echo. It's been a really tough 12 months. As an employee, it's been challenging. I think as a business owner, I have huge admiration for people who've navigated the business through this period. It must have been difficult. I think, and this probably isn't natural to people, but I think as a business owner, they have to almost put themselves first. So they've got to start to think about their well-being, because they're fundamentally the people that will run that business. Their employees look at them to be the people that will steer the ship through these storms.
Great advice.
So they've got to make sure that they've got time out for themselves. Mental health is used a lot these days, and I think people sometimes see it as it's talked about a lot. Is it trendy? It's not trendy. It's here, and it's a big challenge, and we shouldn't duck it. I think for me, if I was talking to other leaders today, I'd probably be asking them to just re-emphasize the vision of their business. So just remind us, what is this business that we have? What is it we actually do? Because it's been such a long time probably until we've done it as we did it before. To your point, probably a good business 12 months ago. We've had to go through some pain. What's the new vision for the business? What's the new strategy? What's the new direction? Try and get people bought into that. And I think if you can get collective accountability for the business, in some ways, as the leader of the business, you're being supported from if you like, bottom up, because your people see it, and your people buy into it and they get it. And then it comes back to your point about transparency as well. You know, what might come along that we need to be prepared for. But I do think we've got to almost start with ourselves and just make sure we're okay and we have time out.
There is a point about that, and a lot of that is the well-being of leaders and our staff as well. And I'm not likely moving over that, but I think in terms of a leadership challenge, there is another thing about people as a resource. So we all know, pre-COVID, pre-Brexit, Wales was struggling for labour. There was a shortage. Wages were shooting up. A lot of businesses couldn't expand because they couldn't find the right people. We're seeing that now. We're seeing labour rates shoot up. If the Welsh government decides, or the UK government decides, infrastructure projects, let's say for example in South East Wales or wherever, it will suck up a lot of that labour and wage rates will go up. And that's going to be a big challenge for all businesses. So therefore leaders have to go back to arguably what you're saying just recently, is reiterating to staff, what is the role they're in, what difference do they make for the business, what's their future career pattern, not just about the pay, but it's about the work-life balance, and all that sort of stuff is absolutely critical. And we're all facing challenges in the marketplace at the moment with labour. We were having this conversation before. We've got to lead our businesses into the next stage, and it might mean that we've got to start becoming or training more people, which leads into all the apprenticeships and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's the way to go.
What's interesting is we've all, I dived in, kind of approached it by saying yes, it's very important, and all came at it slightly differently, which is great. But I think the lesson from that is that if you're a leader, is you are very important. And you are very, very important, and you need to tool yourself up to be that. And I think too often around here, see people who think that they're great leaders when they're not. There needs to be a bit of self-awareness and not be afraid to reach out for help, mentoring, coaching, whether it's informal or formal.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Conscious of the hour, and I've got some interesting questions from those who wrote in and listening. And I'm going to kind of blend three of them together, okay? Because they relate to one another. So COVID has decimated city centres of the major towns, what with remote working, retail and that environment. Busting the myth that home working is skiving means that, in one way or another, lots of us are going to be working from home a load more, which removes the daily commute. No one's going to be unless you have to, piling in up at 7 in the morning in the traffic jam. You'll come in at a time to suit you. Many say that opens up opportunities, perversely, for the towns of Wales. If if you're from Llandilo and you want to work in Llandilo, you can. And then in those city centres and town centres are all the hospitality businesses that have really been hit hardest. So the three things are kind of related. The city centres, a bit like in Cardiff, Newport, Swansea, Wrexham, for example, how's that going to work? Is that really bad news or is there opportunity? Is there an opportunity in the town centres? And how does that affect hospitality? How do you see that playing out? And I'm going to start with Paul.
I think there are huge opportunities with town centres. I think we are going through a period of decentralising our cities, which is fine, actually, because there have been multiple years where the accusation is levelled at our colleagues in Cardiff Bay to say that everything is Cardiff-centric. Actually, the time now is to prove that it's not. And I think we have the opportunity to create an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure, which enables people to work wherever they want in Wales. And they don't have to be Welsh to work in Wales. They could be bankers from the city in London who choose to contribute to the local economy by living in that local community. And I think the smaller towns will win out here. I think the larger cities probably have a greater challenge. And we did a piece of work, the Chamber did a piece of work some time ago with one of the larger civil consulting organisations, Amy Consulting. And there's a consensus across most sectors that were addressed that a percentage of time will be spent in the office or collaborating in a space. It doesn't have to be an office. It could be a hub in Carmarthen or Llandilo or Wrexham or wherever, okay? But as long as you've got the opportunity to work with people, sometimes colleagues, sometimes not colleagues, but physically be in the space where you can interact with people, it addresses a lot of the challenges that we face in respect to mental health and the such like. But in truth, that brings the economy back into those smaller town centres. It enables those hospitality businesses, the panini shop, the coffee shop, the lunch place, the beers after work place, to start to thrive again.
So that's in Llandilo in Newtown. What about Jon, what about the big city centres?
I think COVID has given us some, I hate to say benefits. I probably should rephrase that. I think we've learned from COVID that we can work from home and we can dynamically work in different places, and technology has allowed us to do that. So that's a plus. We've maybe needed COVID almost to kind of stop ourselves and say we don't necessarily have to travel 3 hours now for a meeting. We can do that over the phone. That's a good thing. It does put a stress on city centres and the assets there. I think the bit we underestimate is the social aspect. Shopping, for example, right? It was great that you could have your deliveries to your door pre-COVID. I think through COVID, people have gone, actually, I've missed going to, I'm not going to name any names, but that shop and that shop and that shop on Saturday with my friends. I can't do that anymore because of COVID. So I think it's cyclical. I think in nature, and we've seen it with where we've seen the loss of bakeries, butcheries, and kind of grocers, and we've seen them in the big supermarket chains, and then actually we've started to see them start to come out of the supermarket chains and re-establish themselves back on the high street. So I think we'll see some of that.
So you'll see what you're saying for the big city centres is there'll be some bounce back.
Yeah, and I also think what we miss when we're at home or when we're dynamically working is collaboration and creativity, and I think city centres can become creative hubs. So we think about tech hubs, incubators, just the ability to create and if Wales can get the balance between growing the smaller towns or at least going back to the smaller towns and growing those, but actually using the city centres, that creativity, and therefore putting that money into
endorsing that within the community I live in, someone's already in COVID bought a small office building and converted it into a co-working hub. Yeah. Actually done that, and actually the space that we're filming this in used to be full of lawyers, and actually this is going to be something similar to that. Sorry, Jon.
No, absolutely. Got my local rugby club. They've done exactly the same thing. Some of the spare space in the building, they've created a co-workers environment from which people can, rather than working from home, they can go somewhere to work and interact with humans. I think coming back to the city centres, and this as a classic example, those businesses with space in city centres have got a great asset. They just need to think about how do they use it differently, and therefore you're perhaps not coming here to work. You're coming here to collaborate, as you said, and the city centres can do that. It can provide that environment. They can also still provide that environment where professionals can, intermingle like we are today, and I think that probably does something. So you're not going to work and then coming home and doing the commute, but actually you're going in with a spirit of collaboration, which in itself can be how do we then support the businesses around us that are in the city centres, whether that's lunch, whether it's post event as we're opened up for COVID to drive a bit more of a professional environment into the local amenities.
Simon, are you endorsing all of this, or have you got a...
Not quite, no. I'm sceptical of small towns being invaded. I just think if there's any numbers involved, I think local services will get swamped, and there'll be school problems, there'll be GP problems and all that sort of stuff, and I think that will be a real issue. There's been sort of some history to that sort of thing before. So I'm not... I think it's great if you can do it as an individual, but I think if lots of people do it, I think it'll become an issue. City centres are a problem. So I live on the outskirts of Newport now. And as you know, Newport's been decimated, hasn't it, by the fact that Debenhams has gone from its one sort of major retail city centre offering. And of course, it's got the other thing that the International Convention Centre is sat there empty, which is a huge building, and it's got huge real advantages for Wales. Nobody really knows what's going to happen to that sector yet.
Nope. Late to come back.
Yeah, hopefully it'll be really good. And if it does, there's a lot of hotel space, particularly in Newport, for example, as well. So they want something to do in Newport. And is it Friars Walk, where you've got those sort of small restaurants? They're a different type of restaurant, but it serves a purpose.
But the winners here are going to be those who anticipate these trends.
I think so, and that's the key thing about business. Business will always find a way. I know it's a cliche, isn't it? But it does. People are clever. There's clever people around. They'll find things that people want, and people will go to it.
Yeah,
so.
And just on the hospitality sector, because it's something that's very close to all our hearts, one way or another. We're all consumers of it. Where it's been through pain, we're seeing that going to come back in the same way it was. Yeah, all nods.
Yeah. If anything, I think they'll come back stronger.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think we'll realise what we've maybe taken for granted, and we wouldn't want to lose that, would we? All of us.
Back to John's point, I think what COVID has done is reset some of our values, and I think it is enabling us now to focus again on the smaller businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we will all have seen this, but in the community in which I live, everyone really values the local businesses and does everything they possibly can to support them.
Correct.
And they're not worried whether it's in a couple of quid more. But anyway, okay, I'm going to ask one specific question that came in overnight, which is from a Welsh-based company. 65% of its exports were to Europe, and it can't get them over there now. What's it do? It's a small business, 2 million turnover, 65% go to Europe. If you were them, what advice would you give them? Paul?
Is that to me? When Brexit started in 2016, I was offered a mantra by a colleague in Dublin, which said that there are 3.5 things to Brexit-proof your business. 1 is manage your currency. 2 is, if you're Irish, get an office in England. If you're British, get an office in Ireland. And join an organisation that enables you to be able to do that. Those 3.5 points are still very valid. And I think for any manufacturer who is challenged by getting product into Europe right now, they need to consider the opportunity of potentially collaborating with a supplier or a customer within the European Union or the European markets, or potentially opening up a small office to enable them to behave differently within that territory.
And the costs are fairly low? Have you seen
cost? Well, we did one very recently. It was just somebody rang me up and said, can I help? And I put them in touch with an accountant in Dublin, and it was €900 to sort it out. Okay. So, it depends on the scale of the service that you want. If you want full audit over there, then it's going to cost you more. But the costs are reasonable to do it. It does depend on your business. It is a more complex response than we can give it value here this evening. But I would encourage people to, reach out to those who can help.
Nods, or anyone want to supplement that?
I like that. I do think as well we should, and I think we'll see a bit more of this. I like partnerships. I do think partnering sometimes is a good thing. I don't know whether businesses always see it that way. So we've actually partnered with Propel. So Barclays Bank Propel partner. And what that gives at Barclays, and obviously our clients, is access to experts in asset funding.
Okay.
So, Barclays is partnering, and Barclays is a huge bank. So I think for SMEs Don't be frightened of going to maybe someone that you see as a big player and actually saying, is there a partnership we can have here? Can I piggyback off the back of what you do? I don't know whether they can, but I just think we should start to explore the sort of things more often, partnerships. But I completely agree with Paul.
And I'd say, echoing that point, it's don't necessarily see that as, speaking to the competition and you're weakening your position, because it may be that you can both win out of that scenario because you've got that purchasing power through doing that. So
yeah, we do that. We partner with law firms in most, certainly European countries, and arguably we're giving away some work when we work with them because most of it we could do ourselves. But it just gives our clients a better service, and you learn something. They do things in a different way, and then you can rely on one another. We've got 3 minutes to go, and we're moving into ending. I'm going to ask you all, go around the table. I'm going to start with on my left, John. We talked what opportunities. Okay, what are the opportunities in the future? I've got £1 million to invest. Where would you advise me to put it?
I think there's opportunities to be very different sector by sector. What I would do is I'd have a really good plan that I'd spoken to other people around so that I knew what I could do with that money. I would definitely invest in technology.
I knew you were going to say that.
So definitely because, and I'd make sure that I was really well advised such that I knew how, if I did want to grow my business and there are other opportunities, I knew where to go to get more than $1 million, and I could leverage it up and get 10 million.
Leverage up, get 10 million. And it's not probably come out as much as, but I know you were very keen in making the point that Welsh businesses are not technology up enough. There's a way to go to take advantage of what's out there at the moment. On my question, John, how would you? Where would I put my $1 million?
I'd go 2 sectors: social entrepreneurship. I think for Wales, we've talked about how we've almost got community spirit back.
Yeah.
Social entrepreneurs are brilliant, and they're doing a fantastic job, and there's some really good businesses out there. I think that's ethical investment as well. I'd be supportive of that. And creative industries. Again, I think Wales. I don't think people appreciate in Wales just how many good businesses we have in that sector, and we've got great universities that do that as well. So I'd be looking at creative industries. I don't know what the split would be. Social entrepreneur, probably tug on my heartstrings, the social piece. I might do a little bit more there and less in creative, but that's the 2 sectors I'd be looking at.
Simon?
In nearly every case, I'd say invest in very, very good people and digital skills.
Invest in good people and digital skills. Yep. It's a theme coming through here. Paul?
I'm blending now between the 2 Johns, I'm afraid, because I just think that whole social enterprise model is hugely underutilised in Wales, and I think a digitally based social enterprise model is a very, very powerful, resilient platform going forward.
Yeah, and also we have to do something to do with the legal sector, because invest in what you know in. It's having invested in things that I didn't know about and gone wrong. So yes, okay, look, we're coming to the end of our session. I'd just like to thank you all very much for the contributions that you made. To Paul, who leads the chamber, I'm not sure how it played at home, but certainly sitting here working the round with real people, having a real conversation has been terrific. I've really, really enjoyed it. And if you wanted to do another one, I've only a quarter of the way through the questions that people ask me. John, Simon, Paul, thank you very much. I thought that was excellent, and I hope everybody who watched that enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.